Welcome, everyone, to Partner Up with Amy Carroll. As a communication coach, trainer, speaker, and author, I'm delighted to be your host and excited to bring you insights and ideas to help you solve your communication conundrums. This is the 21st episode of my show, Partner Up with Amy Carroll. If you want to find out more about me or what the show's about, feel free to listen to previous episodes on my website, carrollcoaching.com, or the voiceamerica.com business channel, or through any of your favorite podcast apps. If you missed last week's show, I interviewed Dr. George Kohlreiser, a clinical psychologist and former hostage negotiator. George explained how applying the same techniques he used in real-life hostage situations to psychological hostage taking in daily life, whether it's because we're feeling angry or overwhelmed, can reduce fear and the sense of helplessness while boosting creativity. Be sure to check out this episode from January 15th. Today, my guest is Dr. Suzanne Kryder. Welcome, Suzanne.
Hey, thank you, Amy. Good to be here.
You know, Suzanne, I had the pleasure of finding out about you through a mutual friend of ours, Juliet Jordan, who I interviewed on the show back in October.
Yes.
And I want to give the listeners a bit of your background so they're going to see why Juliet and I were so enthusiastic about getting you on the show. So,
okay.
Yeah. So give me a minute here. I want to really give them some details about you. So listeners, Suzanne, no, her name's not Susanna. Suzanne is a neuroleadership trainer and coach. She blends leadership development with an understanding of how the mind works. So Suzanne has helped thousands of people to be more effective. And some of her clients include the Department of the Interior, University of Maryland, the National Institutes of Health, the University of New Mexico, and the Brookings Institution. Her book, The Mind to Lead, explains how leadership coaching leadership coaching model is about being calm, confident, and powerful. Suzanne has a Ph.D. from the University of New Mexico, an MS from George Washington University, a BS from the University of Georgia, and graduated from the corporate coaching program in 2001. So you're coming up on 20 years pretty soon. We're just about, yeah. Suzanne's the co-founder and host of the award-winning public radio series, Peace Talks Radio. That's peace as in love and peace. So you should definitely check that out. That's right. Like peace, man. And it focuses on nonviolent conflict resolution. In fact, I was just asking before we started the show, asking Suzanne what possessed her to start this. And she shared that she and her partner at the time were inspired after the attacks in 2001. So they kicked it off in 2003. So there is a whole rich resource of interviews that you're going to want to check out. Suzanne has practiced mindfulness meditation since 1985 and is certified through Spirit Rock Meditation Center in California and teaches classes on this. So now that the listeners have a sense of what you bring to this conversation, Suzanne, I really would like for you to share with listeners what you call a success story that you had from the past of surviving a congenital brain bleed. Now that's happened back in 2012, right?
Correct.
So walk us through that whole experience.
Yeah. So congenital means it's something that happened in the womb. So when I was developing, I didn't develop the correct, connections in the brain. And for some reason, it didn't pop until I was 57. So thank you so much for that introduction. You guys have in your head now, like who I am. And then that was who I was. And then I was doing a training in 2012 for the Brookings Institute. There were probably about 40 leaders in the group. I did all day. And then I drove home back to Washington, D.C. from the training. And I was fine. I walked into my apartment, took my luggage, I was unpacking. I had a slight headache, a little tiny one. I never get headaches. I thought, well, I should eat something. So I did. I was eating something. I was talking out loud to myself because that's what people do sometimes when they're alone.
Definitely.
And I sounded garbled. I thought, oh no, so I'm going to call a friend. I called a friend and I said, this is Suzanne Kryder. And she said, I don't know, you just said, you're bumbling, go to a hospital.
Wow.
And so I stood up and I could hardly walk. It happened that quickly. I like to say I went from 57 to 88 in 3 seconds. And there's nothing against people who are 88. It's just that I wasn't 88.
Right.
So I went to the hospital and I was in an ambulance, blah, blah, blah. I was lucky because they took me to Georgetown Hospital. But all of a sudden I was like a baby. And it was very unpleasant. What happened was it's kind of like a brain bleed, an aneurysm. And luckily, I did not lose consciousness. I've learned since then stuff I didn't really want to know about what an arterial venal malformation is. So that was what was happening in my brain, if you can imagine. It was near my cerebellum, which is in the back of the brain. It controls things like walking, talking, balance, and stuff like that. So anyway, my success story is I just kept going. I didn't work for 3 years. I tried very hard after that to get jobs. I had been self-employed and super fit, like, hiker, biker, backpacker, yoga enthusiast, most of my life. So all that stuff was gone. It was a big fat bummer.
Wow. I can't imagine the level of acceptance you had to go through over and over again with things that you lost either temporary or permanently.
Yes, and I don't think I've completely accepted it. But a lot of it is about what I try to teach leaders, which is not to be in the past. I can sit and think, oh my gosh, I was this, I was that, I wrote this book, blah, blah. Well, that's my identity.
Yep.
So that causes a lot of stress, actually, because I'm not right now in the present moment. So I learned the hard way.
Oh, yeah. And it sounds like you're bringing that learning and those experiences to the work you're doing today. I want to ask though, now let me rewind even further. How did you first get into this field?
Okay, well, my master's from George Washington is in exercise physiology. I was working in a really kind of high-class fitness facility where we also did cardiac rehab. And I got really interested in health education. So I was helping to teach classes on like weight loss, stress management, smoking cessation. And in the classes, I can remember, it was probably like 4 or 5 people in a circle, and I would teach them how to do deep breathing and relaxing by the breath. So I remembered this guy came back into a class and said, I can do deep breathing all day long, but my boss is still a jerk.
No amount of deep breathing is going to change that behavior.
Yeah, exactly. And I realized then, I'm working with the wrong people.
Okay.
Health education is a really cool thing, but I need to work with bosses. So that's where I went back, got my Ph.D. and started working and doing coaching with bosses.
Because so much of that, the boss's behavior you probably saw was triggering a lot of the stress that these people were experiencing.
Absolutely.
Okay, so now I want to get into your book, and it is chock full of tools, techniques, advice for listeners. So the title, remember, it's called The Mind to Lead, and you're going to be able to find this book on Amazon. It's described as a captivating introduction to the emerging fields of neuroleadership and mindful leadership. And I have to say, I have not heard that term enough, mindful leadership. I feel like we're going to be continuing to hear more of that. Is that a term that you feel like you've heard? I mean, it's used to describe your book. Is that something that you've been using for a long time?
I had not, because, there's a whole movement called mindfulness.
Right.
And mindfulness is basically a takeoff on meditation.
Right.
Which, so I had never really used that term, but I'm happy to have people call it mindful leadership.
Yeah. And something else that's interesting for listeners, after applying your recommendations from the book, leaders will have a greater ability to do several things. One, stop overreacting to bad news and difficult people. Oh, praise the Lord. Let go of fears of being in charge and make tough decisions, and enjoy challenging conversations with employees, clients, and your boss.
Yes, it does all of that. It has amazing success stories of people I've actually coached.
Well, I want to hear some of those success stories. So as we're going through them, feel free to share those examples.
Okay.
Let's go with the first one. This first one was what you call negative narrative. What is an example of a negative narrative?
So I coached this guy who was really more of a mediator type. He was really just trying to get people in his employment to get along. But his boss was more the director style. She was more tough. And so he had this thought, oh no, she's trying to make me be like her. She's trying to make me be directive. And I really like this mediation style. So we looked at his thought, because a lot of times people just get glommed onto this negative thought, like, oh, she wants me to be like her. And what I want people to realize is the brain is like stuck on negativity. That's what kept us alive, because we looked around and, we saw like a predator or something. So we get stuck on this negative stuff. So anyway, what I try to help people do is investigate their negative thoughts. First thing is write down the thought. She's trying to make
Suzanne, let me interrupt. And you might have said this a moment ago, and I might have missed it. What's your definition of negative? How would someone know if their thought is negative? Because it's causing them stress?
Yes.
Okay. Clear.
Yeah.
Okay. So please go ahead.
At a higher level, we even investigate positive thoughts. But most people aren't there yet. We just focus mostly on negatives.
One thing at a time.
Yeah, one thing at a time. That stresses people out. So yeah, first thing is you want to just be aware you're thinking. That's hard for many people. It's like this thing is going on, but you don't want to listen to what it's saying because it's so icky. So you write it down. Okay, she's trying to make me be like her. And then I taught people a technique I learned from Byron Katie. It's called the work.
Yeah, you and I are both big fans of Byron. Yeah. Or as she likes to be called, Katie.
She's great.
Yeah.
And she has like 4 simple questions. Is it true? So we ask, is it really true she's trying to make you be like her? Second question is, can you absolutely know? Like, are you the ultimate? You absolutely know it's true.
Yeah.
So we just decide, oh yeah, well, I know what's going on. Well, you know what's going on for your perspective, but no one else's. And there's 8 billion people or something? That's a lot to know, 8 billion perspectives.
Yeah. And the good news is you only have to know the other person's in this situation or guess at.
You can guess at it, but that's all we're doing. We're just, we don't know what she's really thinking.
So what I think I understand is you're right. It's not about figuring out necessarily the other person's point of view so much as realizing that you've made up a story here, that it may not actually be true.
Exactly.
Okay. Got it.
Yeah. So the third question is, how do I react when I think that thought? When I think, oh, she's trying to make me be like her, I react like, oh no, that's awful. I get angry,
defensive,
I get scared, defensive. That's a great word. Yeah. So that's interesting information. Fourth question is, who would I be without that thought? So I'm here, I'm talking to her, but I'm not having the thought, oh, she's trying to make me be like her. Who would I be? Oh gosh, I'd be listening to her, and then I'd be going back to my employees and being myself. So it'd be super spacious.
I like how you say that, super spacious. And so I think this is a great moment for us to plug to listeners the work by Byron Katie. It's literally thework.com, I think is her website. And I don't know, Suzanne, if you know this, I did the 9-day course with Byron Katie in Germany about 10, 12 years ago. Oh, it was amazing. And I know she does it normally, pre-COVID times. Also, I think in California or something at least once a year. And there's many other options for people, and there's loads on the internet. So that's a strong recommendation to listeners to check out the work by Byron Katie to really help us not become like I was talking about with my guest last week, a hostage to our thoughts, to shift us from reaction to response to choice.
Yes, I love that. And I've never done a 9-day. I often have done mental cleanse, which I think is about 4 or 5 days.
Mm-hmm.
And being with her in person is such a high.
Yeah, it sure is. Yes, we're fans.
Yeah.
Anything else about that technique that you want to add before we move to the next one?
No. Just that it worked. It really worked.
Yeah, and it works so rapidly. And the other thing I think I would also add, Suzanne, is that the writing it down part. She is a big fan of that. And I hear that over and over again. There's something about just moving it from our thinking to on paper that does seem to shift things faster for people.
Yes, and they've even done research on journaling, not related to the work, how important it is to put things on paper.
Yes. Yeah. I keep thinking I'm going to become one of those people who write stuff down. And I haven't gotten there yet, except like you, I hear that it's really good.
Yeah.
So this second technique, you call it forgetting the goal. Tell us what you mean by that.
Oh gosh. Many of the leaders I coach are really nice people. And so they go into conversations with an employee and they have an idea, I need to set a boundary. But then they get in these conversations and they let the employee take control. Okay, they pull them away from their goal. So this happens.
The employee pulls the manager away from the intended goal.
Exactly.
Got it.
Because the employee doesn't want to talk about anything difficult. So what I did in this particular situation is like Rick had competed with Catherine to get a promotion. Well, he got the job and then she became very lax. And he wasn't really into her anyway. He didn't think she was that good of an employee. So anyway, he had to go in and talk to her about doing certain things. So he had a goal in mind, but once he went in and said, hey, let's talk about A. And she said, but B, C, and D are so exciting. So again, he's such a nice person. He gets pulled off his goal. He forgot what his goal was.
Also, what's interesting, and her name, she was Catherine. What did you call him?
Rick.
So for me, I also wonder if Rick, because he's already this nice guy and there was that history of them competing for the same role, there may have been that sense of guilt or discomfort that Rick didn't want to come in heavy-handed. So then he overcompensated perhaps.
Oh, absolutely. They were colleagues. They were at the same level.
Right.
And now all of a sudden he's, superior. So that's a big part of it too.
Yeah. So he's overcompensating, not wanting to throw his weight around. And the way I describe that behavior, I call it smoke and mirrors, wanting to distract, like little kids who do the mommy, look what I made at school today. Sweetie, it's time for bed. Mommy, I forgot to brush my teeth. Sweetie, it's time for bed. Mommy, let me show you what I'm going to be doing for daddy's birthday next week. And the kids doing all the smoke and mirrors, and the parent, so this is one of the partner mindset techniques I use and tell me if this fits with what your point is that it's the broken record technique. Say what you need to say and keep repeating it calmly and consistently until that other person understands, no, we're not moving off topic A until we've discussed everything we need to discuss.
Right. Yes. It's like a broken record. You're absolutely right. I call it building a fence. So Catherine is just going to run around okay, the whole field until we build a fence around her. So we're going to build a fence by repeating, like you said, the broken record. And also, she probably had parents who let her do that. Like she probably stayed up till midnight just saying, oh no, let's do this, mommy and daddy. And she got away with it. And so Rick has to be a different kind of person. And I think it's also important for him, he did this, is to say, oh, that's so interesting. B, C, and D are so interesting. Let's talk about that some other time. Right now, we're going to talk about A.
And that's beautiful. And that is, to me, that's how Rick can stay in integrity, because he's remaining respectful and kind and still pushing the agenda forward as it needs to be. And that's the same thing when, use the broken record approach. You don't get to be snarky or sarcastic or exasperated. You got to stay calm, cool, and collected as you repeat yourself. Yeah,
exactly. And that's why I help leaders a lot. I call it becoming comfortable with the discomfort. Because what leaders often do is, if someone else is uncomfortable because they don't want to talk about A, then the leader takes that on. Okay. Yeah. And we can't do that. We have to be in our own stuff and be actually okay with their discomfort.
Yeah.
Hard to do.
It's very hard to do. And I think people think they're supposed to feel good about it or comfortable. And it's okay to not feel comfortable and do it nonetheless.
Exactly.
Yeah. I'm curious to know that you had this third technique. And I want to see if we can discuss this before we have to go for a break. This one is called too much tell. Why is telling like Teflon?
Telling is like Teflon because if we could just tell people what to do, that would be great. They just run out and do it, but we can't. So telling is just like, it doesn't stick. It just slides right off, like Teflon coating. What we're going to do is create something in their mind that's sticky. It's like Velcro.
So what is that then?
So this is a story of a true story too, of how I coached someone who had an employee who was a really smart dude, but he just was making his employees feel really ashamed. He was very shaming and blaming. And so what this leader did was she would just go in and say, Randall, stop it. Don't do that. And it's just like, you can't just tell people to stop. That's like me saying, Suzanne, lose weight. It's not going to happen. So we have to create a new way to get them more involved.
And that's through asking, how do you create the Velcro?
Yeah, you create Velcro by asking questions, getting the employee involved. See, if I just tell you something, it's going to slide right off. But if I ask you something, you have to use your own brain and you have to talk.
Yes.
So that's what this leader did. She said, Randall, what's going on when you're actually angry and shaming someone? And he didn't know. He had to stop and look when he was doing it. So it took time.
Yeah. And what that makes me think of is a conversation I had last week with George about, I said, we were talking about powerful questions. And I said, George, one of my questions is, I just reflect and I say to the person, tell me more. And he said, well, that's actually not a question. That's still a command. And if you're dealing with someone who has authority issues, they may not react well to that. He said, all you have to do is to tweak it a bit by saying, would you tell me more? And I was like, wow, that's brilliant. So that really phrasing things as full-on questions and showing interest and curiosity can help people to, as you said, it shifts them from being passive to activating their mind and engaging themselves in the discussion.
Right. Absolutely.
Hey, listen, Suzanne, we're going to take a break right now. Listeners, if you want to find out more about Suzanne, you can check out her website, SuzanneKryder.com. And that's SuzanneKryder.com. Also, be sure to check out her radio show, peacetalksradio.com. And as I mentioned earlier, you can find her book, Mind to Lead, on Amazon. When we come back from break, we're going to be hearing more from Suzanne and more about her book, A Mind to Lead, which shows how busy leaders can improve productivity and effectiveness by incorporating practical brain-based techniques. Stay tuned. You're listening to Partner Up with Amy Carroll on the Voice America Business Channel. Welcome back. My guest today is Dr. Suzanne Kryder, a neuroleadership trainer and coach. And before the break, we were talking about some of her tools and her techniques that she talks about in her book, A Mind to Lead, how we help busy leaders to improve their productivity and effectiveness by applying these brain-based techniques. So we're going to keep talking about these techniques. The next one, Suzanne, is what you call failing to modulate fight or flight. Let's talk about that. Tell me more about it.
Yes. So because a lot of my clients are such nice people, they don't want to say no, and they don't want to set boundaries. But boundaries are good because they allow us to do things that, we need to do. So this is an example with my client named Dick.
Okay.
Who worked for the federal government. He often did free presentations. The guy was an incredible public speaker. So people would come up to him and say, hey, can you do XYZ? And he always said yes. Well, what that did was it really overloaded him. It made him unable physically and psychologically to get stuff done for his own job.
Wow.
Yeah. So that was a real bummer. So again, because his usual response, and this is what leaders often do, is they do either the fight, they get angry, no, I don't want to do that. But he didn't do that. He would just flee, just say yes. So again, I had to teach him how to deal with his own discomfort and realize when he said no, he may see, images of people who he's saying no to, who get upset and they're uncomfortable too. It's really about allowing the discomfort.
Yeah, the work that I do with this model, my sister developed predator-prey partner. What I hear you describing is the predator is the fight and the prey is the flight. And neither is sustainable. And there's a big cost to us and the relationships and the outcomes when we flip-flop between those two. So then how do you walk someone through this? So let's talk about Dick. What did you do with him?
Well, there's a third F that people sometimes don't know about called freeze.
Yep.
So it's fight, flight, or freeze. And if you, think about the opossum does that. So if a opossum sees a predator, and this is kind of what Dick did, if a opossum sees a predator coming towards them, they just play dead.
Yeah.
And they wait for the predator to go away. So what I help people do is realize, what does it feel like to go dead? Or what does it feel like to just say yes when you're not really feeling it? So the first thing is to connect the feeling of saying yes, saying no. And I told him to start with things that were really simple. I don't know, if someone says, did you say you want latte? Oh, no. I said, I just want plain coffee. So you start with something super simple and just notice what that feels like to say no. Even though you think you're right. And then when you get higher levels of people saying, can you do this? Can you be on this project with us? We would love to have you on the panel. Then you can more easily say no. Okay.
Sure.
So it's about also sensing in the body what it feels like to say no. And for many people, you can feel it right now. If I say no, you can't do that. It feels like a constriction in the chest or the stomach.
Yes. Yeah. And my sense is that it probably triggers that feeling of fear and anxiety for people when they push back and say no. So What happened with Dick?
So he learned over time. He took really simple, small steps at first, saying, no, it's not a latte. And then when people would come up to him, he was prepared. So much of it is about being ready. So he knows when he's, ending the presentation and he looks and sees someone coming towards him, that's a trigger right there, even before they say anything. So when a person comes up, you can start noticing sensations. Oh, here she comes. Here comes someone. It's always the same person, actually. This woman named Susan. She would come up. They'd known each other a long time. And she kept asking him to do all this stuff. He kept saying yes.
Right.
So Susan came up and he had these sensations in his body. And he's looking at her. And again, you want to start with something nice. Like you said, gosh, this feels so good that you asked me. Thank you so much. I'm going to say an answer that you may not like.
Nice.
And then you let her respond. Oh, no, Dick, what are you going to say? No, we have to have you. And then Dick says, I'm going to say no because I really want to be able to spend this time on my own job. So you give an explanation.
Yeah. So what I hear two things from that is, well, I hear the broken record that he might have to say it over and over. And frankly, saying no to Susan, I think in that example is a big stretch because she's so used to Dick saying yes, that is going to come as quite a surprise for her, as opposed to him saying no to a complete stranger for the first time. So that's significant. And then I also am hearing he's preparing the other person by saying this might come as a shock. So there's already building what I call a cushion of preparing the receiver for bad news, which then you're slowing down the exchange, which slows down the impact of the shock. It's like shock in slow motion, which does not have the same impact.
Right.
Yeah.
And then you give an explanation. That's so important. And
thank you.
You can also help Susan. So you can, again, shift back to the stickiness of asking questions. So I taught him, hey, well, what's a question you could ask Susan? Oh, well, who else could you get instead of me? Then she starts thinking about the future and who else? Oh, I could get blah, blah, blah. And what do you think about that? Could I call you and maybe you could help me? Oh, then he has to say no again. Oh no, let's figure this out right now.
Yeah, you're right. Because that's another thing you've probably heard of some research that people love explanations. Give them the reason why, even when the reason why may not be particularly impressive, it's still like, no, I have to say no. I'm saying no because I have to say no when there's technically not an explanation, except even that's like their brains go, oh, okay. Yeah.
Exactly. And that's why I have people plan everything out. He knew exactly what he was going to say. He was going to say, no, I can't because I really have to do this for my job.
Yeah.
Who else could you get? So you don't go in cold. You go in with a plan.
Yes. And what I'm hearing is the rehearsing, the importance of being ready, because under stress, as people know, the brain freezes up and then it doesn't function as well. Maybe even are having an amygdala hijacking. So your executive function area is really not functioning at all, perhaps. And so the rehearsing, what you're doing is creating new pathways in the brain so there's something that is available even when the brain is having an amygdala hijacking. So don't underestimate the importance of practice.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you for mentioning rehearsal. So as a coach, I would rehearse with him and I would say, find someone else you can rehearse with. Have someone practice saying no and having different reactions. I always say, tell that person to have a positive, a negative, and a neutral reaction. So do it at least 3 different ways.
That's fantastic. Yeah, because that's the greatest fear of, oh my God, if they have a negative reaction, can I handle it?
Right.
And so you're having them practice. And it's weird that even listeners might be thinking, well, you're practicing. No, it doesn't have the same impact. Oh yeah, it does. We still can have a physiological reaction even in a silly role play.
Exactly. And in my book, The Mind to Lead, I tell people to write down exactly what you would do if the person has a negative reaction.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly what to do if they have a positive reaction.
Mm-hmm.
So you have it all planned out.
Yeah. Yeah. That's beautiful. And these, what you're describing, these are training wheels. You won't have to do that all the time and every time.
Right.
Though if you do it enough, you create enough the awareness, you're creating the new pathways, it'll be available to you when you need it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. That's why, some people eventually opt out of coaching because they get so good at this.
Thank goodness, right? That's a good sign when people don't need us anymore.
Yes.
So this next tool that you talk about, forgetting feelings. What does it mean when someone at work says to you, I want to have a beer with you? Tell us about that.
So beer is a tool I developed, BEER. I'm not really much of a drinker.
Okay.
But I thought that if I used that word, it would be a good mnemonic device. People could just remember beer.
Okay.
And is it related to Dr. Marshall Rosenberg and his assertiveness technology. So this is not exactly how he does it, but it's what I developed.
Okay.
So BEER stands for, you say the behavior, the affect, the emotion, and a request. And
behavior,
what that means is
emotion, affect, request.
Actually,
the other order.
Yeah.
Behavior, effect, emotion, request.
Right. So nice. This was a really interesting case study with one of my clients named Bill.
Okay.
And Bill was a consultant. He was a contractor, but he was working full time. And what happened was his team would develop times for meetings when they knew he was not available. Huh. So he couldn't come. He got really upset.
Why did they not want him at the meetings? Did he figure that out?
Because he was so aggressive and so hostile.
Oh, of course.
This is not like the standard client I have. I usually have these really nice people. He was a really reactive, really angry and hostile person. Mm. And so these people were kind of, smart to say, well, we don't want him at meetings. But then he got even angrier because it was really critical. He was the tech guy. It was really critical that he be at these meetings.
Can I ask you, when did he figure out, and if it's a story you want to tell me in order, just can let me know, when did he find out that the reason he was being excluded from these meetings was because of his attitude and his aggressiveness?
Well, it took a while, and they didn't do it all the time, but he would go to meetings and he'd be hostile. So then they figured out this was a workaround for them.
Right. They figured it out, though. When did he find out?
Yeah, well, I'm not sure exactly how long it took him to figure it out.
No one told him he had to figure it out on his own?
I think he might have, and he may have asked someone. I think he went to the people and said, hey, I need to be at this meeting. And they just said, no, it's okay. We don't need you there. And he knew he needed to be there.
Right.
Yeah.
So maybe his common sense or maybe someone else in his personal life might have given him some suggestions. Well, gee, Bill, did you say his name was?
Yes.
Gee, Bill, maybe you're a jerk sometimes.
Probably. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank God for honest people in our lives.
He knew he was,
and he knew that.
That's why. Yeah. That's why he hired me, and he had a therapist. And so he
fantastic.
He knew he was difficult. I'll just say difficult. I don't want to label him as a jerk.
And we can all be jerks. I know I can be. Yeah. And Suzanne, I have to say, those are the kind of clients I love working with because I'm a recovering jerk.
Oh, good for you.
I'm a recovering predator. And I get why people behave that way. So that was just a side point. So I'm fascinated by the story. That's why I want to ask all those questions. Okay. So.
Oh, yeah. It's really interesting. We can't make people be different, but we can help people say how they're feeling. So it was in a meeting, I'm really I really promote laser. So don't say too much because it can't stick on people's brains. Just say a little bit. So I taught him behavior. You just hit this, Bill. This is Bill talking in a meeting.
Okay.
When you guys schedule a meeting for times that I can't attend, that's the behavior.
Okay, so
Impact.
Suzanne, I think it's really interesting for listeners to understand that you mentioned Marshall Rosenberg briefly.
Yes.
What listeners might not realize is he's the one who back in the 60s started to develop nonviolent communication. You and I both have been trained by him. I was actually in your state of New Mexico some 15 years ago doing an intensive training with him. And so what your listeners, what you're hearing is Suzanne's version and her own approach to helping people use this nonviolent communication to, how do I want to say it? Improve the communication during delicate, difficult conversations. Is that accurate, Suzanne?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So back to Bill. So, thanks for letting me cut you off. So the behavior, he identifies when you guys do this and you have meetings without me.
Yes. The effect. So it's BEER. Effect is I can't give input that's needed. Okay. I can't give input. The emotion is I'm angry.
What a surprise.
I'm hurt.
Oh, that's beautiful.
That's a big leap for Bill.
That's huge for any, because we got to be vulnerable. One, we got to be aware, and then we have to admit it, and that feels scary and vulnerable.
Yeah, and the request. So I request in the future, you set the meeting times when I can attend.
Oh my gosh, Suzanne, I love this acronym.
How come?
One, because I can hold on to, I love the beer analogy, and I want to have a beer with you. It's such a play on terms and concepts, saying I want to engage with you in a different way. I want to be honest and open and vulnerable, and I'm going to make a specific request. And so that's so for all those reasons, it's very attractive.
Oh, great. Yeah. And when I do trainings, I suggest that people start with someone really easy. Don't start with the hardest person. Do a beer. So in training, sometimes I'll say, now I want everyone to invite someone they work with to the training, and we're going to do beers. Mm-hmm. So it's so cool because the employee who's in the training can teach the other person how to do a beer.
Right.
And then they give a beer and they receive a beer.
Yeah.
So this helps people feel a little bit more comfortable to slowly increase the difficulty level.
Yeah. One of the things I added to Marshall's model is something I call a safety net, which is after the request, I then say, so let's say I make a request to you. So if I'm Bill and you're the colleague, and I say, Suzanne, would you be willing to include me in the meetings? Now, the outcome is, the idea is that you would say yes to that, right? And you say, yeah, sure, Amy. And then I would say to you, that's great. Thank you for agreeing to that. And in case you forget, what should we do? Or in case you forget, I'll follow up with you. Or in case you forget. So that I call it the safety net, because you may have every good intention when you say, yes, I'll do that to your, Girl Scout honors, you have that intention to absolutely do that. And then human nature kicks in and you either forget or it's not a habit yet. So the safety net is, checking that I'm going to somehow follow up, or let's discuss what happens if that you don't do the thing that you've agreed to. So I think that that's a very powerful addition so like safety net. So beers, you can put an S at the end.
Yes, beers.
Let's have beers.
I love that. I call it contingency, but safety is
nice,
because we can add beers. And I also want to say that with this model, some people are like, no, because emotion, forget it. I don't do feelings at work. However, we're always having feelings. So what I like to explain to people is there is brain research about what's called the affect labeling. And affect is like an emotion. It's my affect, it's my emotion. What they're finding is that when someone can say they're feeling, it actually lowers the reaction in the limbic or the emotional system in the brain, and increases the ability to think with their prefrontal cortex. So saying a feeling is not babyish. It's actually very cool.
Yeah, no, I'm going to say it a different way. Tell me if this is accurate. The way I understand it is when we label our emotions, either to ourselves or to others, it's a form of self-empathy. And it immediately calms us down.
Yeah.
You would agree with that?
Yeah, that's beautiful.
So there's nothing else has to happen. I mean, we want other things to happen and other things can happen, though nothing else has to happen for that alone. Just labeling, I'm really feeling shocked, or I'm embarrassed, or I'm feeling ashamed, or I'm feeling disappointed, or I'm feeling flabbergasted. That's a good one. Gobsmacked. I like that one.
Yeah.
And that's sometimes enough just for us to go, whoo, and to trigger that parasympathetic nervous system to kick in. So, Suzanne, let's name some of those websites for listeners. There's the cnvc.org, and then the other one is the nvctraining.org, right?
Right.
So those are two NVC websites people can check out. Also on my website, people can go to resources, and I've got a print of those lists, because Suzanne, that you talked about the feelings, they say, most of us can maybe identify maybe 8, 10, 12 feelings that we have. When you look at this list, there's just, columns of feelings for us to choose from. So I think it's important that people see it as, in a way, almost like we're learning a new language when we're learning to identify our feelings and our needs. So people can find that list on my website.
That's great. I also like to simplify stuff. And so the 4 cross-cultural feelings, there's only 4: mad, sad, glad, those all rhyme, afraid. Mad, sad, glad, afraid.
And you said these are cross-cultural. Say more about that.
That means that they've done studies across all cultures. And they found that all people, regardless of where they live or whatever, their skin color, gender, age, have examples. Those are the main 4 feelings.
Okay, very cool. And as we were talking about this, that something that popped into my mind was a book that I read that I can highly recommend. I don't know if you have ever heard of this book. It's called Thanks for the Feedback.
Oh, sounds great.
Yeah, and the writers are Stone and Heen, Heen, Douglas Stone and Sheila Heen. So listeners, you may want to pick up this book, because we're notoriously bad at receiving and giving feedback. And so this book really helps you to, some of the things that Suzanne has been sharing today, you may be supported in that book. So that's a recommendation I have. So listen, we only have a few minutes left, Suzanne. So I want to talk about just a minute or two at the most about a topic that we share, which is privilege. And during my interview, October 2nd, with Juliet, she talked about how she had recently discovered her own white privilege. Though, we know privilege is often associated with skin and race. We also know skin color and race. It encompasses so much more. In a moment, what are your thoughts on privilege?
Yes, well, I'm glad you mentioned skin color, because as a white person, it's huge. Skin color is a major privilege that I'm not aware of. And I also want to say that there's another kind of privilege that many people are not aware of, and that's ability. So ability relates to, I'd say, like in the US where I live, probably 95% of people I see seem to have physical ability. And as a person who had that for 57 years, I just wasn't aware of it.
Yeah.
But when I became disabled, because of this congenital brain bleed near my cerebellum, it impacted my walking and also my talking. You may hear I sound a little slurry.
Mm.
That's because of the impact on my cerebellum. It's almost like a feeling of being drunk. I don't feel drunk all the time, but when you see me walk, you might think, oh my God, she looks really drunk. Well, I'm not. And so what I want people to realize is that most people live in an able-bodied world, and they take that privilege for granted.
Yeah.
But people who have a physical disability, either it's something about walking, or it might be vision, it might be hearing. Oftentimes those people are labeled as weird, or and sometimes the labeling impacts a person so they don't want to go out. That's what I want people to recognize.
Okay, Suzanne, thank you for that. We have just a minute left, and I want to wrap up now with a call for action to check out Suzanne's book, Mind to Lead, available on Amazon. Also, you guys can reach out to me on my email, amy@carrollcoaching.com, 2 R's, 2 L's, to share questions, comments, discoveries you have about your own communication challenges and clashes. You can check out Suzanne's website, SuzanneKryder.com, and also remember to check out peacetalksradio.com. Feel free to connect with me on my social media channels, Amy Carroll Coaching. If you're ready to take your superhero partner powers into the next decade, join me for one of my online leadership presence courses. And you can find out more about that at carrollcoaching.com. Thank you, Suzanne. It's been a lovely conversation.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it. It was great.
Cool. And thank you, listeners. You've been listening to Partner Up with Amy Carroll on the Voice America Business Channel. Be sure to tune in next week for more. Happy partnering, everyone.